about the code challenge, or just kind of how it's gone in terms of React or any lingering JavaScript. But other than that, I'll just be. Please let me know if I can help.
Yeah, I was thinking about running through Toy Tales and just sort of doing a walkthrough on that and seeing how folks are feeling about it. And
Sounds good.
Go from there. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna share my screen if I can figure out how to do that. There we go. Close all the slacks and all the things. Great. Cool. Come on. Awesome. Sweet. So yeah, I would like to look at Toy Tales here. And this kind of exercises a lot of the stuff that will be on the code challenge. I don't know if it's new that this is labeled a practice challenge. I don't know if we've ever used it for a practice challenge. Just an exercise. So yeah, let me go ahead and clone this down here. If it wants to clone it down. There we go. Awesome. Cool. Let's see what we're doing here. Cool, so we're gonna install our stuff, start up a server. We've got our data that looks like this here. It's just an array of toys that has IDs, names, images, and likes. Awesome. And we've got a couple of deliverables we want to look at. So when the application loads, we're going to make a GET request, and that's going to be a use effect, so we only do that once. We're going to look at what we have component-wise and put the data in the right places. That will help us render out the toy cards. Do we want to do the posts and all that stuff there? Yeah, we'll look at the first one first, and then we'll talk about doing the posts. I don't know if there are posts on the code challenge. I don't think there are. Am I lying? I don't know. We'll find out. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get this set up. Run server, npm start. Great. Guess our JSON server. Great. That's what our API looks like. Or API looks like. And this is what really? Oh, yeah. Yeah, really, because I didn't yeah. In the meantime, let's look at what we have component-wise while that's going together. So we've got our index.js that's going to render our app into our root there in our HTML, which is here. There's our root div. So all of our React app is going to render into that. We almost always just render into root, but really you can render into any element you want. Very few cases where I can think of practically where you want to do that, but you can do what you like. So our app looks like this. We have our main body here, it's the fragment. We've got a header. We have a show form that is just a boolean, or it's a state, but it's just holding true or false right now. And if that is true, we're going to show the toy form, otherwise not. And we've got our div here, that's our button container that has the add toy, and then we have our toy container. I would name that toys container maybe, but our toy container has a div that's going to be our toy collection, and we're probably going to have toy cards in there. So let's look at, while this is still running, what we would want to do our first thing here, which is when our application loads, make a GET request. So this is our app, and we want to, the first time this is rendered out, we want it to load up our API. So that sounds like a fantastic place to use a use effect. And yeah. So we can just bring in use effect. That and import it for us. If you don't have your VS Code set up to do that, just type it in yourself. And use effect, we're going to take our function here. That's going to do our stuff. And we're going to give it that empty dependency array, which means that since we're not watching anything to change to run it, it's only going to run the first time. So use effect technically runs every time you render a component. It's just that use effect, the hook runs every time. The function you pass it only runs if the dependency array tells you to. So since we have nothing in the dependency array, it's going to tell us use effect to run our function the first time and then never again. So we're going to want to use hey, here we are.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Is it best practice to keep the fetch or the use effect in the parent level component or app in this case?
It depends. I mean, you use it for what you want to use it for. In this case, we're using it to load from the API when it runs. But you can use it, it's just a hook that you can use wherever you want. So if you have a component 6 levels down that you want something to happen, once when it loads, use effect goes there. Or if you want to make it do something when a state changes, use it there. It's really just a matter of what you want there.
Sure. So I mean, we're loading all of this fetch data into toy container.
Mm-hmm. Into the app, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we could put it in toy container too. It would be all the same.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to. I was just curious.
Yeah. So this is this is one of the peculiarities about the sort of route we're taking in learning this. I don't know how much lecturer talked about what state is versus how we use it. State in a component is really intended to do just that, like talk about the state of that component. And that usually means stuff like, is it showing this form or not? Is it in dark mode or not? What's the value of this text field? Whereas stuff like we'll be loading in, that's not state, right? That's like our application data, and though we're going to be using state for that. It is kind of like the state of our app, but it's really data that lives in our application, not necessarily in its component. So in a real world scenario, you're not going to be putting it in state. You're going to be putting it in a state management system like Redux or Recoil or something like that. So the way we're using it is a little bit hacky, but basically when we want to keep our data in state like this, we want to keep it at the highest level that is going to be touched by things in that level. So we could put it in toy container, yes. That would make it a little bit more difficult to add toys to it, because then we would have to basically store another state up here and then pass it down. So
sure. In this case,
yeah,
it seems that we have toy container and toy forms that both need to use that. Those are both siblings, exactly. So keeping it higher up in app seems to make sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but if we didn't have that, absolutely, you could throw it down in the toy container. You could, put it wherever you want, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Why are we getting an error here? Why is that happening? Post CSS. Fascinating. Maybe that's a problem with having an old package lock. Let's get rid of that package lock and try again. So while NPM is doing its thing, let's go ahead and do this use effect here. So fetch is going to be just like the way it was in vanilla JavaScript. This is, for all intents and purposes, looks like vanilla JavaScript, even though it is technically not. Hey, let's see if that works now. No, okay. What happens if I just install tokenize? Did anyone else have trouble getting this to work? Have you tried it?
Seems to be working.
Yeah, it's working fine for me.
Oh, fascinating.
Right, trying to install the dependencies.
Yeah, something is not liking it in CJS. That is. CJS lower. Interesting. Let's see if that fixed it. I don't think that usually doesn't fix anything. That's really interesting. Huh. I feel like I've had this problem before once or twice. I don't know what I did to fix it. Why would that not be exported by the thing? It's so weird. Tokenize is there. It's not in that. Why don't see how it interesting.
Ooh, I gotta head out, y'all. My landlord's here.
Go for
I
it.
might be back in a little bit.
Go for it.
Good luck.
Hey, there we go. Nope, there we don't. Oh, a little bit. Got a little bit farther that time. Dang, what is this? Digital envelope routines unsupported. What? Oh no. I know what this is. This is something changed with the oh, gotta look this up. This is yeah, this is a breaking change in SSL, and you need to add, what is it? Uninstall. Yeah, that legacy provider thing. Okay. Try this one more time. And if that doesn't work, I'll put it in the npm start here. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Drag it here now. Come on, buddies, let's do it. Hey, all right, cool. So there's our blank thing. Okay, back to the real stuff. So we are going to do a fetch to our API, which is this. I'm just going to throw a const. Hold that. And let's use that. So let's do a fetch. To that API. JSON dance. Stuff. The process is not defined. Where? Cool. Here's our stuff. So we're getting our stuff from our API. Great. What is that? That's fine. Cool. So now that we have our stuff, let's put it in state. So let's make a new state. That's going to be our toys. And then let's just set toys with that. And we can, we get our JSON back here, and we can do set toys JSON like that. Totally cool. Same thing as like the console log, since our .then is just taking a function to pass the JSON to, and we're just setting, we're getting our JSON and sending it to set toys. We can just say, hey, then set toys, because we're just setting that data. We're sending that data that's coming back to our state. We're just setting the data that comes back with that function. So we're just passing it that function. It's going to take that data and throw it in there. And we don't want that extra thing in there. Great.
Hey Mark, I have a question real quick.
Absolutely.
Do you need to put anything in the use state? Like you have an empty array in there right now. Do you need to put anything in there?
Yeah, I'm putting the empty array in there because we want to set it to an empty array to start off with. So we're going to be doing some, toys is going to be our data. So we're going to want to map over it and stuff. And this is something a lot of people sort of struggle with at first. Since there's a sort of mental shift about thinking about what nothing is in programming. Because we kind of think as humans, I want to start off with nothing there. So, let's just start with nothing. And that's not true. We don't want to start with nothing. We want to start with a list of nothing, which is still a thing, right? So when we go to put our cards on the page, we're probably going to map over it or something like that. But we also want it to work when we don't have any data, which means we want to give it an empty array to map over, which means it's just not going to do anything.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if we have undefined or something there, you're going to get an error, and I'm sure everyone is going to see this error at some point, saying like .map is not a function on undefined, or it's not a method on undefined.
Yeah, I've been getting a few of those.
Yeah.
And if you left it empty and then set the state to your JSON response, would it be an object?
It'll still be oh, that's a great question. So it'll be an array, because remember, we're getting back our where's our let's get back here. So what we're actually getting back, the JSON is an array.
Okay.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, so we could be getting anything back. We could be getting an array, an object, a string, a number, anything it sends back. In a lot of cases, you will see it as an object, and it'll be like object toys, and then our array. In this case, we're just sending back an array, so we can just set it to an array there.
Cool.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, so if you see that undefined error, try it with whatever data type you'd be using in that state there. Yeah, because an array of nothing is still a thing in our case. Yeah, cool, great question. And let's take a look and see. I have, if you don't have the React development tools installed, I highly recommend that. So you can look at our components here, and we can see in our app we do have a state that has all of our toys in it. So we can see when that lives. Oh, I know the other thing, and this is the other part that sort of confuses people at first. We think about what it's going to look like when we render out our data, but remember that when it starts up, we're going to render it the first time with no data, because our use effect is making that asynchronous call. So it's going to, when it renders, it's going to run the fetch, render out our JSX into HTML, and throw that on the page. And since fetch is asynchronous, could be a millisecond, could be a year, we don't know. So it's going to render once without any data first. So we need to make sure that the first time it renders without any data, it works, or it looks reasonable, because we don't know when it's coming back. Awesome. So, and since we're setting our toys in our state, the state is changing. When the state changes, it's going to re-render. So let's see what it looks like when we render stuff. So our toy container is where we want it to render. I assume it says that, right? Oh, there we go. What do I have? 2 windows. Yeah, let's take a look at that. So our toy container is where we're going to have all our stuff. So let's go ahead and pass the toys as a prop there. And we'll say toys is toys. So that will be available in toy container as toys, which means we want to destructure that out. So this is going to be our props, and basically just saying, hey, turn that props object into, if it has a toys key, we're going to destructure it into a toys variable, so we have that there. We could also, this is the equivalent of doing that. So that works just as well. This is just a little bit more idiomatic. Not necessarily easier to read if you don't, if you're not familiar with it, but you will see this everywhere. So get used to it. So in our toy collection here, this is where we want to render out our toy cards. And since we have our toys here, makes sense. We're going to want to map over it, right? Since we have an array of stuff where we want to display all the things of. So in that case, let's go ahead and do that. Let's do toys map. And let's see, we'll take each toy. And so map is our transformation. It's going to turn an array into another array of the same size that looks different. And so we're taking each toy object in the array, and we want to turn it into a component object, right? Or what the component functions return. So we've already imported toy card. Since we are doing a map and we don't want to get yelled at, we want to give it a key. And these all conveniently have IDs. And then let's just pass each toy in as a prop and see how we can use that. Nope. Yep. What did I miss? Toy card. Toy. I don't need that. There we go. That toy there. Cool. So this is mapping over all of our toys. It's turning each toy into its equivalent toy card and passing that data into each toy card. So let's look at what toy cards look like. You can actually command click in theory. Can you do that here? Yeah. Command click into the component. And so yeah, we're just going to destructure the toy out of the props. And now we can put all these things in here. So we can say name, toy image, the name of the alt. I think it's just likes, so let's just include those. It feels like that should get pretty close to doing it. Let's see. Hey, look at that! They all showed up. Oh no, what happened to Rex?
Links broke. It was on phase 1 too.
Oh well. Slinky Dog is being pokey too. Oh, Slinky Dog. Oh well, they're mostly there. Cool. So there we go. So that's how we do UseEffect to run our fetch once, take the response from that fetch, putting it in state. When that state changes, we're going to be re-rendering. We're passing our toys, which are in our state, to that toy container. Toy container grabs those toys out of props, maps over them, and throws toy cards in there. And the toy card also grabs the toy prop and puts all a name, image, and links and stuff on there. This is the stuff that we want to get fluent at, because this is the stuff that we're probably going to be using almost every time for code challenge, for projects. From now to the end of the course, we're probably going to be doing this in pretty much every app we make. So this is the stuff you want to be like, okay, I'm going to load up some data and display it when I load up. This is the stuff you should be able to knock out in like 5 minutes. I don't expect you to be able to knock it out in 5 minutes right now. I expect you to knock it out in 5 minutes after doing it 100 times. So the more times you can build and burn this part, the faster you'll be able to do this, and then you can spend time thinking about the more difficult parts. So I think that satisfies our first deliverable. It looks like it does. Cool. Any questions about anything up to this point?
Sorry.
Yeah,
No. You had your hand up.
Can you go back to the component? Because mine's technically running, but I just want to make sure that it's the correct syntax and everything. So the toy container, please.
Yeah.
I'm just double checking. Sorry. Does line 7, so the Curly Breeze toys.map, and then you have the parentheses toy. Mine was still populating without having toy in its parentheses.
Yeah.
Would that
That'll also work just fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually prefer it this way, but for some reason my auto formatter likes it that way. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
I just haven't bothered to change that.
Okay. Cool. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. When you have only one argument going into an arrow function, you don't have to put parentheses around it. But if it was like toy, thing like that, you would need to put in parentheses.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Mason, what do we got?
Sorry, I just can't figure out why mine isn't loading on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like double checking all the stuff.
So what do we mean by not loading? Is it not hitting the API? Is it not getting a response? Is it not putting the response in state? Is the state not being passed into the container? Is it not mapping over it? So there's like, this is the detective part of like pulling that string. So we can go through and look at first our console. Are we getting an error when we're hitting the API, or can we see when the API is loading, are we getting our gets there? If we go into our components and look at our app, is the app loading our state in here? If it is, let's check our toy container. We have our toy state here. Are we passing the toy state in there?
I got one error.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even really an error, but it's line 7 of toy container. Array map expects a return value from arrow function.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, it says line 7 array.map expects a return value from arrow function.
Okay. Yeah, so do you have the body of your arrow function in curly brackets?
Yes. I do.
Yeah. So without the curly brackets, that will do an implicit return. With the curly brackets, you have to explicitly say return. So either take off your curly brackets or return it explicitly.
It's so frustrating when it's just that one thing that looks almost exactly the same.
Yeah. And that's when like your error messages are not lying to you, even though like programming hubris is such a big thing. We're like, I know I did it right. I know I typed it right. The error message is saying I didn't, but I did, and you probably didn't. Like I've fallen into that trap 10,000 times.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for getting us distracted.
No. That's why we're here, for sure. Yeah. And also, even though it's not lying to you, it may not be as clear as it could be. So, like, it's not returning. An arrow function needs to return a value. It's like, okay, yeah, great. How does that help me? And so it takes a little bit of sort of mulling that over to be like, okay, why is that a problem here? Am I doing that? And if it's not returning something, if we just have our curly brackets here, it's going to be returning undefined, which means we just start throwing a bunch of undefines on the page, and that'll make it not show up. So it does take some like wrestling with and detective work, but trust the error messages, and worst case, like you saw me do it. If you can't figure it out, Google the error, and that'll get you somewhere. Awesome, that's a great question though.
It's just about Rex.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Rex. There we go. Rex. There we go.
Grace put a link in the chat if you want to use that.
Yes, I do want to use that. Thank you. Where is our chat? Oh, look at the chat. Hey, Rex, what's up? Looking good. I know. Fantastic. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, any other questions up to this point? This is kind of the heart of what we'll be working on / with. So if there's any part of this that you're not super comfortable with, now's the time. Awesome. Let's just take a look at the next part and see what we got when we do a post. When the toy form is submitted, make a post request to toys to save a new toy. Using the idea's controlled form and inverse data flow, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So, think about how to release a token. Think about it. Let's not just think about it, let's do it. How about that? So, toy farm. So this is, this is a good place to talk about this. So our toy form, add a toy, shows our toy form here. And we can see that when we click that, even without looking at the code, that probably is setting our state to true and false. Here, it's showing that. And we can see that it is in fact doing that. So let's take a look at our toy form. And that is the toy form that's here, clearly. It's got 2 fields and a submit button. So let's start off by wrangling this form, controlling it a little bit. So we want, it's JavaScript, so there are several ways to do it. Let's do it let's do it this way first, and then we'll maybe go back and try a different way. So since we are controlling this form, that means that we are creating a state for each piece of the form that we want to hold data for. And this is a proper use of state. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to do it in the toy form, of course, not up top. Let's make a const for the toy name and a const for the toy image.
Need to import your state.
Say again?
As well. Import your online one, right?
Yeah. If you, I think by default now it does it. If you tab it out, it'll do that for you. If not, put up there manually. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Cool. We'll do the same thing for the image. Cool. And we're setting those to empty strings at the top. And now we want to control it by setting the value here. So now whatever the state is, when it renders out this component, it's going to put the value of that state in there. And let's hook it up back the other way by doing on change. And let's do set name. Again, the event. So on change, we're setting the event handler. The event handler is a function. We're moving an arrow function in this case. The thing that gets passed to the arrow function is the event itself. And we're saying, given that event, we want to set the toy name of the event target value. The target is the thing that threw the event. Since we're looking at a change, the text field itself is the thing that threw the change. So we can just grab that value from the targets. And I'm going to plot that there and do the same thing for image. Great. So now, in theory, we should be able to look at our toy form here. We've got 2 states. We can type stuff in name. Maybe. Why can't we type stuff in the name? What, did I break it? Let's see. Add a toy. There we go. I'll do that. Toy form as our states. We type in here, and that should update as we do it. This seems like the first time I came across this, I was like, that shouldn't work. And again, I don't know what, how it was talked about in lecture, but it feels like it would just get into an infinite loop. Like, oh, it's setting the value to the toy name, and then when it changes, it sets the state, which should we render it, should do an infinite loop there. And I think just looking at it without stepping through exactly how the component gets rendered and everything, it's not changing, but we're not getting an onChange event when the input field gets rendered. So when we get that toy form, it's saying, cool, our state's going to be this, we're setting the value to that state, and we're just listening for a change event on the form. So when we change the value of that form on the HTML page, not necessarily the value of it, then we are re-rendering and setting the value again. So that onChange can be a little bit misleading because it's a change event on the HTML form itself, not a change of the value there. So, or if that's too much to think about, don't worry about it and just do it like this. And it worked. Yeah, that's just like one of the things my brain grabbed onto. It's like, it shouldn't work, but it works. Cool, so now we have those values in state. Amazing. So now when we click this, create new toy, here, or submit the form, on that submit, we want to change our, so we want to do two things. We want to update the backend, and we want to update our state. And I think, again, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I think I prefer to do that all up where it lives. So I'm going to just grab a form, handle submit. And so this will be our function that we're passing in as handle submit. This component doesn't care what it is, and that's kind of why I want to do it up there. This component's responsibility is to submit a form and do something. It doesn't care what it is. It could be sending a post, it could be just updating an array, it could be just logging it out, it could be anything. The form itself here doesn't care what you do with the data. All it knows is that you're going to be giving it something that will do something with the data. Its only responsibility is to manage its state, and then when it submits, do what you tell it to do. So since the form is the thing submitting, we're going to do an onSubmit, and all it's going to do is handle submit. And again, the form doesn't care what that is. So while we could like do the patch and stuff here, it feels like it would be a lot of extra work, and I'm lazy. So, and this also allows this to be used, not that we would do it with this form necessarily, but in some of the code challenges, we do something like this. A component might want to do different things depending on where it is in your application. So passing it a function to tell it what to do is super handy. Yeah, so let's go ahead and send this handle submit on there. And so we know that is going to be a submit thing. So we're going to do a couple things here. Let's do a, I'm not going to call it, I could just call it handle submit here. And say toy form handle submit equals handle submit. And that'll work just fine. I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to call this function, I'm going to name this function semantically. I'm going to name it what it does. And what it's going to do is create new toy. And so I'm passing, the prop is still called handle submit because that's what that's the contract we established in here. The toy form is looking for something called handle submit, so we have to give it something called handle submit. What that function is doesn't matter. It could be handle submit, it could be create new toy, it could be shoot it into space, make a sandwich, whatever. And again, this lets us do multiple things. If we had two forms and it was, make the toy a sandwich, I would turn the toy into a sandwich or whatever. We could make another function, and then these two forms would do two different things depending on which one we omitted. In this case, we know that we are creating a new toy, so we're going to call the function create new toy. It's going to take an event, which is going to be the submit event. We're going to want to prevent the default on that. Default. And let's just see what we got. So this is the form, and we got a name and an image. Let's just console log target name. No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. That's a bad idea. What I want to do is on submit, I want to, so we could do a couple things here, right? And this is the bad way to do it. Not bad, it's just less good. There's no bad and good. Easier and harder is what I would say. So we have our name and our image. I bet that'll work. I bet that'll do what we want. Let's just see what we get here. That. Will it do the thing? Well, value. So we're going to get the value of this. And that's fine. That's fine. But we're using React. So I actually don't care about events in this case. App is not in the business of form handling or event handling. App is in the business of taking a toy, and console logging out the toy. I don't care where I get this toy. I don't care if it's coming from a form or if I'm getting it from another function or whatever. I'm just going to create a toy. Which means I don't care about handling submits, in fact. What I do care about is creating new toys. And so that means I'm changing the contract. So now we're looking for a create new toy. And here's where I want to do the form handling, because we're handling the form where the form is. App doesn't care about forms. App cares about components. So let's do this. We can make a handle submit in here, though. And that's going to take our event, and that's going to prevent our default. And now, in that handle submit, we can call create new toy with target name and target name value, target image value name. And we could just send it like that, but I think I would just like the toy object. So in that case, I'm going to pass up a new object here. So now our form is doing what we want. Inside the form, it's handling its own stuff. It's maintaining state. And you know what? We don't even need to grab stuff out of the form anymore, right? Why? Because this is React, not JavaScript. So we have our state. Let's use our state. And since we have a toy name and toy image, we can do this. And so now we know that for sure that's going to have the correct name and image for our state. This is a really simple example, so any of these will work. Rule 1, it works. This is just kind of like me refactoring as I'm thinking about what's easier for the app as a whole and what's like what's the idiom that React likes to work with. But if you did it the other way, where you're handling the submit out there, if it works, it works. It's great. I'm going to take this one step farther here. Instead of toy name and toy image, I'm just going to make this name and set name. And I'm going to do image and set image. And that means I'm going to change this down here, and here, and here, and here. And that allows me to just use our object's shorthand there. So when I create a new toy, I'm just creating it with the name and the image. And so this is equivalent to saying name, and image, like that. This just lets us make it read a little bit more nicely. And again, small example, so whichever way works. I feel like this is probably the state that I want to leave it in, because it just reads the nicest to me. If other ways are easier for you, I encourage you to do it whatever way is easiest. This, I think, in the long run, like during project week, I highly recommend trying to do it something like this, because as you go along, other ways will feel like there's more friction, and the longer we work on an app, the less friction we want, because if we add a little bit of friction every day that we work on an app, you're going to wind up with a lot of friction at the end. So, and again, this is just stuff you learn by practice. That's why it's like best practices. It's not like do this or it's wrong, but I've been making apps for a long time, and I noticed things that make it easier in the long run just become habit. And those things might be different for you or for your team. If your team has a certain way of doing things that reduce friction for the team, they might be different than something that reduces friction for you as a programmer, or a different you as a programmer. Everyone's different, especially when using JavaScript. That said, let's see if any of this actually works. So we have our form. It's preventing the default creating a new toy, and create toy right now is just console logging toy. Let's see if that actually works. And HTTP, blah, 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 blah. Create new toy. Hey, look at that. So now we have a new toy. It doesn't have an ID, however, and it doesn't have a number of likes. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to do the patch or the post. I'll leave that as an exercise for the programmer. But I am going to add this to the array, and so we can just look at what that looks like. So we have a new toy. The new toy is going to need an ID and a likes, and we'll kind of do that on the fly, I guess. Yeah. Well, let's just do it with the toy first. Now we'll see what happens. So we have our set toys. React state. You cannot change state, right? You cannot change state. State is immutable. We can replace state, however. So when we set toys, we want to set it to the new state. We can't change the state as it is. So we just want to set toys, and in order to set state, we want to let's give me a squiggle there. Did you mean set toys? No, I didn't. Not at all. Because it's not that. It's that. So we want to set it to a new array of toys. We can't just use our current array, so we need to make a copy of our array. Again, JavaScript, many ways to do that. The current React idiom is to use destructuring and the spread operator. So we're going to create a new object. This is a new object here. Inside that object, we're going to use our spread operator to make a copy of toys. And at the end of that, we're going to add a new toy. And we're not spreading an object, we're spreading an array. You can do it with objects or arrays. So now we're creating a new array, not a new object, creating a new array. Let's start from the beginning there. So we're creating a new array. That's how you create a new array. And we're using the spread operator to spread out the current, each object in there. We're going to throw in there the contents of that current array. It's not the array itself. If we do that, we're just going to have an array with two things, the first one being an array. So we want to spread out the contents of that array, add a new toy at the end, and that's pretty much it. So this should update our toy array. Since the state is changed, it should render things out. Let's see what happens. Add a toy. But I have, hey, there's Jesse. Do I have Jesse's image? I do have Jesse's image. So Jesse's going to be added at the end. In theory, each child should have a unique key. But here's Jesse down here. Why doesn't Jesse have a key? Because she doesn't have an ID, and we're using IDs. I'm going to do two things here. One, to make it easier for us, I'm going to put Jesse at the beginning. You don't have to spread at the beginning. You can... Spreading it is just another thing you're putting in the array. And in fact, instead of just putting her in there, also notice she doesn't have any likes. So I'm actually going to spread out that toy and add likes 0. And I'm going to do something that I recommend never doing, but I always wind up doing when I do this. I'm going to set an ID, and we can't just set a random ID, can we? Let's just set that ID. Never do that. Never do that. Always have a better way of getting IDs. In a perfect world, we're going to be doing our post. We're going to be creating a new toy in a database. We're going to be getting that new ID from the database. And then we're going to be setting our toys. So we'll do our like fetch posts, data here, and then do this stuff. We're not doing that right now. We're just setting it. So we're just going to make up a random ID for now, just so it doesn't complain about keys. Since we didn't set it in the database, Jesse's not there. Let's set Jesse there. Hey, 0 likes, no complaining. And if we look at our state and our components, we can see that there's our random ID, and there's all the stuff we just put in. Yeah, and that's time. Questions? This was a lot.
Where did we put our prevent default? Is that an app, or is
that's in the form
in
itself?
Toy form?
Yeah, because that's all. Again, this is a matter of taste, really. I like to handle stuff in a more contained way, so toy form could be used anywhere, and so we don't want whatever is sending a function into toy form to have to worry that it's getting data from a form. It just wants the data. So I prefer handling form stuff inside the form components, but if you do it another way and it works for the code challenge. If you're doing it in a project, you will probably quickly find that you want to do it this way, just because it's easier. Again, nothing is right or wrong, it's just easier or harder. If it works, it works.
Go back to the app real quick.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I'm seeing is that with the likes, we could also set the likes to 0 in the toy form, right?
Yeah.
So like while you're posting, you can just likes to, and that would effectively be the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Could we also set the ID?
We could set a random ID in there. Yes. The problem doing that would be that we would do in reality, we would do our, fetch, all right. Why did it do that?